Welcome everybody to the Captain Spot. I'm your host Justin Freeman, 6 foot 1 inches, and a COVID-induced 294 pounds of fantasy knowledge. And we are talking Saturday night football in the playoffs, 8:15 kickoff time, where we'll be talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Washington football team. And this game looks like it should be a tad bit one-sided. The Bucs are favored in this game by 8.5 points. Total currently sitting around 45, so a tad bit low scoring and obviously a bit one-sided according to Vegas. That gives us a little bit of an inclination of how we should play it straight up. Or if we want to get a little bit weird, obviously we can go a little bit heavier towards Washington players. But there is an injury report for us to keep an eye on this week. 2 Bucs pop up on the injury report here this week. It's Ronald Jones and Mike Evans. Ronald Jones got in a full practice on Tuesday. Not worried about his status at all going into Sunday, or Saturday, I should say. Mike Evans, on the other hand, got a DNP, did not practice on Tuesday. Want to monitor that situation throughout the week and make sure that he is clear and active in time for game time on Saturday night. On the Washington side, there are a couple banged up guys. Alex Smith at quarterback. You've got Antonio Gibson at running back, Terry McLaurin at wide receiver. All 3 of those guys did not practice on Tuesday. I don't think that's going to be a major problem for any of them moving forward. Just a lot of rest management. These guys are having, season-long injuries that they're just playing through at this point. It's the playoffs. These guys are going to play. Evans is a little bit scarier, though, because we don't know exactly what the damage is to that knee and what the sort of recovery timeline is. It happened just last week, so hopefully he can get back out there and play. We'll project him in there, and we can adjust as necessary. So overall, just maybe want to ratchet down expectations just a little bit for these guys as they, work their way through some of these injury situations. But like I said, this should be an interesting game. And anytime we're talking about where Vegas is projecting more than a touchdown favorite, I think our first instinct should be, well, we can build around that most likely game script. But your contest type is going to determine so much about how you should be constructing lineups, because if you're playing large field tournaments and you're trying to differentiate and create unique lineups, a very good way to do that would be going heavy on the Washington side and just hope for this to be a low-scoring game. I think if you're building around Washington, going with Washington D would be a good way to consider getting unique there. Another way to get a Washington asset in your lineup, so to speak. What makes this really difficult, perhaps, is that the coaching staff for Washington has announced that they are considering going with a platoon approach at quarterback. We typically don't see this at all in the NFL. Indianapolis does this just a little bit with Jacoby Brissett and Phillip Rivers. But for the most part, we don't see, I guess you could say you do it in Miami also with Fitz and Tua. But this is a situation where the football team understands that Alex Smith may not be the answer. We may need a spark, and we're just going to go ahead and lay the groundwork for Taylor Heinicke coming into this football game. So overall, just make sure that we are aware of both of those guys, that we are, sort of limiting our exposure to each of them accordingly. I don't know whether you can actually start Taylor Heinicke, at least in anything that's small field. Obviously, in large field, you do absolutely anything you want to. So if you want to make some Taylor Heinicke lineups, go for it. But overall, let's talk our way through this, and starting with the pricing. Let's start with Tampa Bay. Let's go line by line here. Tom Brady, $10,800. He is your top quarterback here, obviously, in this game. Like I said, it's tough to want to justify paying the $9,000 for Alex Smith when you don't know he's going to get a full game. But if the rest of the field is going to be feeling that way, perhaps we get Alex Smith at a discount. We know that if we can get a full 60 minutes out of Alex Smith, he's going to tend to give you, what you need to pop up as a flex option for you. So continuing to work down through Tampa, Ronald Jones will cost you $7,200 this week. He's asserting himself as the lead back. Came back after missing a couple weeks, got 54% of the team's snaps last week, 55% of the team's rush attempts. Not targeted in the passing game. That's always going to be a concern for Ronald Jones, but honestly, that was a game that kind of got away. Not worried about that at all for Ronald Jones moving forward. LaShawn McCoy, $200. He was inactive last weekend. Leonard Fournette, $4,600. He played half the snaps, and so I think overall we're seeing, like, we know by now how the Bucs would prefer to use Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette, and it's going to favor Ronald Jones in a pretty big way. Fournette probably be a guy you might have more interested in if the Bucs were projected to be down in a game. So I think for now we can feel pretty solid about Ronald Jones there at 7,200. Looking at the tight end position for the Bucs, Rob Gronkowski's the guy, $5,800. Not a ton of targets, honestly, for Gronk so far over the last couple weeks. 11% last week, 5% the week before that, 16-9 going back. So just not a super large target load there. You're banking on touchdowns with Gronk, but that's exactly what Gronk does. But another guy who I'm really interested in, specifically if Mike Evans were to sit this week, is Cameron Brate, $1,800. If you look back at how the snaps went down after Mike Evans went out last week, it wasn't any of these other number 3 receivers that just saw a huge boost in playing time. Like Scotty Miller saw a tiny boost. Tyler Johnson actually played a little bit less than he did the week before. Who actually was the big winner was Cameron Brate. Cameron Brate was on the field all the time. He was the one running all the routes. Antonio Brown became a full-time player, obviously, at that point. And so I think Antonio Brown and Cameron Brate are the 2 direct beneficiaries to Mike Evans being out, should he be out this week. And if you want to play Mike Evans and he's in, he'll cost you $9,400 this week. And I think we're starting to see sort of, the differentiation on the depth chart here. To me, it's pretty clearly Chris Godwin as a very slight 1A, Mike Evans just behind that as 1B, and Antonio Brown a pretty distant 1C so long as they're all healthy. Antonio Brown obviously stepped into a bigger role last week with Mike Evans out. But, price point wise, they're all within $1,000 of each other. To me, that's enough to lean more Godwin, lean more Evans over Antonio Brown in those situations. And I don't think you want to go much further down than that. If you're talking about guys that can get a little bit of target action, it'd be Scotty Miller at $2,400. I don't think you can go down to Tyler Johnson at $1,000. Just not getting enough targets there. Now, looking at the Washington side of the football, we mentioned this quarterback controversy. It'll be a $9,000 Alex Smith with a $6,000 Taylor Heinicke. I don't know when this team would actually consider pulling the trigger and pulling the plug on Alex Smith, so to speak. It could be something that happens in the first quarter. It could be something that happens in the fourth quarter. It could be when the game's sort of out of hope for Washington. But overall, just consider that a really wide range of outcomes for both of those quarterbacks. I think playing some Heinicke lineups could make sense because, let's think about what does the scoreboard look like when Taylor Heinicke enters the game. Washington's probably down 2 scores. They're looking for a spark. Alex Smith's been getting destroyed, and so Heinicke's going to be basically coming in and crushing, right? He's going to be coming in and throwing the ball deep. He's looking to make plays. So I think I'm actually really drawn towards that strategy of building around Heinicke. If we look at some of his pass-catching options, J.D. McKissic at $5,400 is very interesting. I don't think you want to consider Antonio Gibson a ton in this game because he's priced at $8,000, which is a fair price for Gibson, but going up against this Tampa Bay run D, it's going to be a really tough sledding for him. Very few running backs have had success at all year long against Tampa Bay's run D. The success is going to come through the air if Washington is going to have any. And so overall, I don't mind, playing that Taylor Heinicke stack is actually really interesting. Playing him with Logan Thomas, playing him with J.D. McKissic, playing him with Terry McLaurin. And I think you can pretty much say it's those 3 guys. I mean, you could maybe go down as far as Cam Sims, $4,400. But I don't think you have to because, Terry McLaurin, $8,800 is underpriced here on this slate. Logan Thomas, $6,600, underpriced probably also. Both those guys are going to project for over 20% of the targets in this game. And J.D. McKissic's right behind him. So I like that 3-player set. If I think Heinicke's in the game, it's if he wants to dump down, it's going to McKissic. If he wants a mid-range, it's going to Logan Thomas. And if he wants to push it to the perimeter, it's Terry McLaurin. Sure, you could get a sprinkle of other guys involved. But overall, I would say you feel pretty confident that that's the trio there for Washington. Obviously, want to encourage you to consider your defenses, consider your kickers in this game. Bucs D would cost you $4,800. They also would pair well with a Heinicke lineup if you wanted to go that way. And remember, when I'm saying Heinicke lineup, Heinicke may not play at all. I would make that a portion of your portfolio if you're playing a large number of lineups. But 4,800 would pair well with Heinicke because it typically would probably mean that Alex Smith is getting destroyed in the pocket. Tampa Bay's pass rush is getting there, and they're rocking and rolling. The Washington football team D, $3,000. I think that's a great way to pair with Alex Smith, because if Alex Smith is staying in the game and playing a complete game, it could be because that defense is keeping Tom Brady and company in check. Maybe they're getting to Brady. I mean, Brady is a lame duck back there in the pocket. Very easy for Washington's talented pass rush to get there against Tom Brady. A little statuesque there. So overall, I think there's a lot of different ways that you can consider building. I am more drawn towards J.D. McKissic straight up over Antonio Gibson this week. I just don't see a rushing path that exists there for Gibson against Tampa Bay, especially given the spread. Let's take a look at our captain assignments here this week, where it is actually Terry McLaurin who leads the way here. And I think if you think this through, it kind of makes sense. It's not that we think that Washington is some favorite in this game and McLaurin's ceiling happens more than everybody else's, but it's really the fact that he is has the clearest ceiling of anybody on Washington. Whereas if you look at what happens when Tampa Bay runs the game, then it's obviously going to be a mixture of Chris Godwin lineups, Mike Evans lineups, Rob Gronkowski lineups, Antonio Brown lineups. Whereas for Washington, it's much more simple. A big game for Washington is a Terry McLaurin lineup. It's Logan Thomas sure could get there a little bit. J.D. McKissic possibly, but overall we're thinking Terry McLaurin is the most direct path towards captain here in this game, followed by Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Tom Brady, Logan Thomas, Cam Sims. So, and that Sims lineup would be one that could, open up some salary so you could play the higher price guys over on Tampa. Looking at our flex appearances, it's of course Tom Brady up at top. He's going to be a core piece of what we're putting in there at the flex, followed by Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas, Cam Sims, Chris Godwin, Ronald Jones, Antonio Gibson, Antonio Brown. So, we know Washington is going to drop back to pass in this game. And I think you'll see like Alex Smith, look how far down he is. He's under J.D. McKissic based on what we think we are going to see in terms of split here in this game. So if we can't project a full game for Alex Smith, certainly tough to rely on him. But overall, we've got some really unique ways to play here. I think I'm interested to build a couple Taylor Heinicke lineups. I hate to even make that a recommendation because it might not work out, but I would say invest small in that sort of thing. But overall, you've got reasons to build around Heinicke. You got reasons to build around Alex Smith and other lineups. And the Buck side's a little bit more straightforward. You want to sprinkle in your Ronald Jones. You want to sprinkle in your Evans, Godwin, and Brown wide receiver trio. And it's pretty straightforward from there, guys. So that'll do it for us here this Saturday. We'll have your Sunday night show over on the Captain Spot YouTube channel. If you hadn't subscribed over there already, go ahead and knock that out. YouTube.com/the CPT We'll have your Sunday night show here for the rest of the postseason. That's going to do it for me, guys. Hope everybody runs well this weekend. We'll see you soon.